In all honesty, California is a beautiful state. Awesome history, lots of our American culture has come from California. But in general, I can't possibly think of the state or the name California without thinking of it as a big, appalling joke. In almost every way, shape, and form. Truly, it must be the worst run state in the United States of America. They're ridiculously in debt. Crime is out of hand. They don't even enforce laws. And it seems that the laws they do enforce are frightening and absurdly almost dictatorial or totalitarian in a way. I used to really enjoy traveling to California and catching the vibe. Yeah, I know I sound like an old guy trying to talk kid speak, but in all honesty, beautiful state. Whether you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, you're down in the greater Los Angeles area, you're going up through Monterey, or my wife and I taking, the Pacific Coast Starlight. Yeah, we actually rode the Amtrak all the way from LA up to San Francisco area. And it was delightful. I just love the American history there. But the state is a joke. And something that has recently popped up that made me go, yeah, California, is about cars. And simply put, the title of this article from the San Francisco Chronicle says, California could require car governors that limit speeding to 10 miles an hour over posted limits. Yeah, y'all ever been to a golf course? You know how the golf carts had little governors in it and then people would stick a T in it, typically the club car, so they'd go wide open? Yeah, same thing. They want to make it so cars cannot go beyond the speed limit more than 10 miles an hour. At 10 miles an hour, that's nice. It gives you a little bit of something. Let's move on and read some of this article. California would become the first state to require new vehicles to be equipped with speed governors, technology that limits how fast they can be driven under legislation by San Francisco State Senator Scott Wiener. The bill, introduced Wednesday, would require cars and trucks of the 2027 model year or later that are built or sold in California to include speed governors that would prohibit motorists from driving more than 10 miles an hour over the posted speed limits. Now, beyond my reaction of screw it, I'll move to Texas, or literally any other state than there, let's dive into this a little deeper, saying that we're not all car guys and gals, such as myself. You can choose whether you think I am a guy or a gal. That's up to you. I don't need to tell you what you need to think I am. Anyway, keep in mind that this article is saying California would become in the circumstance of actually doing this. I kind of hope they do, because it would be a laughable disaster, in my opinion. But let's look at on the side of what potentially could be good of it. Well, one, you don't have to worry about having police out there trying to enforce radar. Although this would only be for new cars, not the older cars. They're not talking about mandating on that yet, but we're gonna have to read on and see if that pops up. So perhaps that could be helpful, and they could be using those police officers to enforce crime elsewhere, or maybe to clean up the massive amounts of human fecal matter all around San Francisco. But I digress a little bit. If they weren't gonna enforce laws they didn't want to enforce anyway, they're not gonna then anyway. My curiosity here is, what about everything that's not a new vehicle? Let's move on. The legislation aims to address the epidemic of traffic deaths in the Bay Area and California, Wiener said. Traffic fatalities rose during the pandemic in San Francisco and nationwide, and speed factors in about a third of traffic deaths across the country, according to the National Safety Council, of course. The National Highway Safety Administration estimated more than 40,000 traffic fatalities in 2022. That's a lot. I wonder how many people are dying in abortion clinics. Moving right along. The tragic reality is that a lot of people are being severely injured or dying on our streets in San Francisco and throughout the country. It's getting worse, Wiener told the Chronicle. Wonder what's happening to the California, to the culture that people are doing that. Wonder what's happening with the congestion. Wonder what's happening in every way, shape, and form that relates to California and the leadership choices they make and their own infrastructure, rather than suddenly now, for the first time in history, band-aiding it and requiring all new cars to not go too fast. Because it's clearly not their fault in any way, shape, and form. Yes, that was sarcasm. We have speed limits, and they exist for a reason, and it's perfectly reasonable to say that you can't travel more than 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, Weiner said. That's what this bill would do. It's very reasonable, and it's an idea whose time has come. You know what would else be reasonable, California? Enforcing your other laws, cleaning up your streets, not coming up with stupid things that waste money that your state doesn't have, and also making it so no one in California wants to buy a new car. The legislation could have a sweeping effect on how people drive personal vehicles in California if passed by the legislator and signed by Governor Gavin Newsom, our favorite pal with the greatest ideas in all of history. Cars subject to the speed governor requirement wouldn't be able to drive faster than 80 miles an hour on a state highways with a post 70 mile an hour speed limit, for example. Unless, of course, you put a golf tee in the right spot. The bill would also apply to city driving, as motorists wouldn't be able to drive faster than 35 miles an hour in quiet residential streets with 25 mile an hour speed limits. Honestly, I have no problem with that. If you're speeding in town anyway, that's ridiculous. And there are very few places anywhere that one can speed much. And even me with fast cars such as this, I'm really not speeding very much out there. The bill exempts emergency vehicles such as ambulance and fire trucks from the speed governor requirement. The California Highway Patrol would have the discretion to disable speed governors on their vehicles, of course, provided that the vehicle's use is reasonable and would not pose a public safety risk according to the bill fact sheet. You know, that's interesting. If the California Highway Patrol or a person driving an ambulance, which is a very heavy, top-heavy vehicle with mediocre brakes for potentially how fast it could go, or fire trucks that are incredibly heavy and can't handle, if they're able to go faster than everybody else, and these aren't like professional racing drivers, then doesn't it go to say that somebody in a vehicle that performs very well and has great safety and handling prowess, maybe speeding or going a little faster isn't actually a problem at all? Or are you guys just flaming hypocrites? I know you do the latter one really well, but it just makes you wonder a little bit if this may just be a little too authoritarian. Let's go on. Weiner's speed governor bill would also require trucks weighing more than 10,000 pounds to come equipped with side underride guards if they are built, sold, or registered in California. Side guards are meant to prevent people and vehicles from getting swept under a large truck during a crash. Okay. That's reasonable, you know. You got a big semi-trailer, and I presumably going to have some sort of guard, so like Nerf bars, you know, in a sprint car or something like that, so they go up underneath. That's reasonable. You know, if you look at a school bus, our school buses are throwbacks to the past. We're talking half a century or more, and you know, it's got that it's built up high, and it's got that bumper way high, which is way too high from any automotive regulation. And I'll tell you, that bumper on the back of a school bus probably comes even with the roof of my car sitting right here. So yeah, I wouldn't fare well in that circumstance. But we're here. We're going to be protected by our politicians and the infinite wisdom and genius of the ones in California. Also known as speed limiters or intelligent speed assistants. They always love their pretty words to make things not sound terrible, don't they? Some speed governors can use GPS technology or cameras to cap vehicle speeds based on where the car is driving. Several auto manufacturers, such as Hyundai, already offered speed governor features in their newest models. And I just thought they were really effing slow, which some motorists utilize as a form of cruise control. Again, they're really effing slow. Let's say they do this and actually stick with it, which would be idiotic. Well, then it's going to be a problem with all the old vehicles. So then what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to get rid of that. Then they're going to have to mandate that there's governors on that. And that's going to be really hard, if not impossible, to do. So what they're going to do is they're going to leverage insurance companies, which are another evil that exists that's gotten too big for its own good, to make it too expensive to have older cars there. And it's fascinating because California is already impossible for anybody that isn't wealthy to live there and buy a house, basically. So in California, you either need to be a homeless bum living on the streets and trying to get money from rich people, which is fascinating because I really honestly think all the homeless people in like New York, Detroit, Toledo, Cleveland, whatever, you know, all the cold places, just move to California. There's basically no laws. The weather's great all the time. And you got a bunch of liberals out in like Malibu, the Pacific Palisades, Rodeo Drive. Just go bum money off of them. They got it, and they just tout as trying to help everybody else out. Sidebar, all the homeless people in America and all of the migrants. Guys, go to Southern California and San Francisco. Just take their money. They want you. They love you. That's what they talk about. So no one in California is going to be able to afford cars once it goes to that place. So perhaps they'll actually do this with new cars, but it's going to blow up in their face. It's going to cost a hell of a lot of money, put them miles farther in debt, and some very small-minded people that really probably have never worked a day in their life or contributed to society in any meaningful or constructive way will justify having a job. Until, of course, the entire state blows up in everyone's faces. Oh, but I digress. We'll move on. Spur, the urban planning think tank. Walk, San Francisco, and other street safety advocacy groups support Wiener's legislation. Still, the bill is likely to face opposition from the auto industry and California motorists who may view the proposal as a form of state overreach. Well, no shit. So, auto manufacturers, California motorists, which is everybody in California who isn't homeless, isn't going to like this and think it's state overreach. Oh, I wonder why. Perhaps because it is? Oh, it's so great that we've got this Spur urban planning think tank and Walk San Francisco and street safety advocacy groups. Well, is this just more death by 1,000 cuts so you guys can get your totalitarian 15-minute cities and control everybody? Maybe. But, I wonder if you guys are actually that smart. I kind of don't think so. Because what you are is the laughing stock of the United States. Period. Let's move on. The idea of capping how fast cars can be driven to curb traffic deaths is not a new one. Several highway safety groups have urged Congress to pass a federal requirement, and the National Transportation Safety Board last year recommended that the federal government, at a minimum, require speed limiters in cars that warn drivers when they're speeding. Require speed limiters in cars that warn drivers when they're speeding. Let's think about that. First of all, if it's a speed limiter that allows you to speed, it's not a speed limiter. So what you're telling me is it's some sort of device that doesn't limit speed, but tells drivers that they're speeding. So let's think about this for a minute. How does a motorist or a car or motorcycle driver or even a speedy cyclist know what a speed limit is on the road? Well, if I think back to my traffic safety school, there's these funny looking white signs on the road on a stick. It has a number on it, says speed limit. And that tells me what the speed limit is where I'm driving. Isn't that wild? And did you know on cars and motorcycles and bicycles and all them things, some of them fancy smartwatches made out in Silicon Valley, we got something called a speedometer. Got a little needle or a number. It tells you not the velocity, because I think that's speed plus direction, but it tells you how fast you're traveling, relatively speaking, to the earth that ain't moving, i.e. your speed. And that tells you what you're doing. It's kind of funny that all these people in California done come up, they need a speed limiter that warns drivers if they're speeding, because we already done got them. But if you want to justify your job by coming up with a new word for something we already have, well, that's your prerogative. It's also my prerogative to think that's a steaming pile of horse shit. And you're an idiot. I'm just glad you live in California and not over here in Ohio where we're not complete idiots yet. So this is a waste of life, but at the very least, it's food for thought. I understand where you're all coming from and wanting to help out and maybe make life better. But the fact of the matter is, humankind will never be able to make all of life perfectly safe. And you know what? I don't want to live in a world that's perfectly safe. That is boring and impossible. And anybody that thinks that they can do that, one, you're not God. You're not an omnipotent being. You're not magic. You're full of yourself. But isn't that what California's entire problem is? I always think back about that South Park episode when, Kyle moved to San Francisco, and they all sat around doing wine tasting. But the difference is they would fart in wine glasses, sniff it, and enjoy it. Because that's California in a nutshell.